Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Christy Taylor, and we are back for another episode of the Career Coach RX Podcast. Now, we are called the WORxK Solutions Career Coach RX Podcast, and we are so excited to have our guest today. We are going to be speaking with Mrs. Michelle Steiner. Miss Michelle was diagnosed with a learning disability in kindergarten, and she became an advocate for individuals with learning disabilities later on in life. She owns and operates MichelleMissions.net. And so we are very excited to have her on today because, as most of you know, we are moving into an initiative where we are really embracing our commitment to social impact, embracing DEIA. And so we want to feature those individuals who are serving as advocates and making a difference in the lives of the everyday person. So, Michelle, thanks for coming on today. We're excited to have you on. So please share with us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me on. Yes, my journey with a learning disability started whenever I was in kindergarten. That's when I was first diagnosed. My teacher could see that I was really struggling in the very beginning with things such as tying my shoes and counting and dot-to-dot pages. I can remember that was a really big one. I would get a paper and I thought, oh, I did it right. And when I got it back, it wasn't correct. And my teacher noticed the academics and also the social aspect that I was struggling with. And she recommended to my parents that I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, once I went through all the evaluations, they found out that I do indeed have a learning disability. During that time, nobody really gave a specific name for it. It was learning disabilities were an umbrella term. The only thing they knew is I was not going to be a mathematician in kindergarten. The school psychologist figured that out pretty quick. And I can just remember it was really difficult for me in the very beginning. I had to repeat kindergarten. The following year, I had to go to a different school in our district that still was a public school. And I can just remember feeling really frustrated when I was a small child. I just wanted to learn like my peers and be accepted. And that was hard too. Being that it was a small school district, I couldn't hide. I couldn't blend in with everybody else. Everybody saw that I went to learning support. So the bullying started really early. And I can just remember when I was young, it was, okay, you're not my friend, or I don't want you to play on the playground. But when I got older, it got a lot worse. School got easier for me, though, academically as I went throughout the years. I can remember they found out pretty early that I could read and I could speak very well. So they put me in regular ed for reading, science, and social studies. And I went to learning support for having supports when I took a test. I had extended test time. They read the test aloud to me, and that really helped me to be able to process the information. By the time I was in high school, I was in all regular ed classes except for math in a resource room. Now, socially, it got a lot harder because the bullying really intensified. And I can remember one of the things that helped me was I found a group that was just right outside of our school district that they worked on things with writing and art and all kinds of stuff like that. And I started to find acceptance with people that, didn't know me since I was in kindergarten. And that also led me to my adult writing group today. I still hang out with these people 20 some years later, and they got to see me grow as a writer and as a person. One of the things, though, that also was really significant during my teen years was with my post-secondary goals. I knew that I wanted to go to college and I wanted to work with kids, but I was hesitant because of having a learning disability. And I wasn't alone in that fear. I had a learning support teacher who told me, I don't think you can go to college because of your math ability. And she suggested a trade school. Nothing at the trade school interested me. And I got connected with Office for Vocational Rehabilitation. And they said, okay, college looks like that's a possibility. We'll start out at a community college. But in order to get tested for having one and to get all the services that I needed, I had to go through the testing once again. And I've never been a great test taker. And the psychiatrist who evaluated me said, well, based on your scores, you're most likely not going to go beyond a community college. And that was really difficult to hear that as a young person that was just ready to enter college.
That's very interesting. Usually my next question is what drives you to do the work that you do, but I just kind of want to spend some time in that area, right? Because
Right.
I told you earlier that I was a teacher. I've taught K through 12, well, K
Mm-hmm.
through 4 as an elementary teacher. And so I want to ask you some questions about your experience with
Sure.
that. But I spent a great deal of time in the community college, and I think that that's really I went to a community college myself, and then I, went on to go to college. And sometimes community colleges get a bad rap, but something that stood out to me about what you just said is having someone to tell you based on your test scores you're not going to be able to go on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
you know, your experiences and you talking about being bullied, the importance of having that learning support. Um, and your triumph of going on despite what somebody's, because this podcast is about having mindset transformation. You persevered. Thank goodness you
Mm-hmm.
didn't just succumb to the fact that somebody put their expectations or projections on you, because you went on to get your bachelor's degree. And so I want to spend some time in that circle of like, and I think
Sure.
it really leads to that first question of what inspired you to do the work that you're doing right now with Michelle's mission? We'll come back to my question that I have for you about children, but I like the fact
Sure.
that you didn't say, okay, this person's expectations of me is as far as I will ever go.
Mm-hmm.
You got the work, you got the help and support you needed, and you were able to finish. So what was that journey like? And even just, can you kind of even just share from what those feelings was like when maybe you were being told that you're not going to be able to do all of these things, but then that experience of being able to triumph and succeed anyway, right?
Right. I can tell you a lot of what the feelings were was fear because I was already nervous. I was not blind to the fact that it was going to be a challenge for me, especially with math because I never made it out of learning support maths very successfully. And I also wondered, well, how am I going to do my other classes? I was doing really well in regular ed classes with having support. So when I heard that, I was really afraid. But I also knew that if I didn't follow my heart and I went and decided I'm going to go to tech school to become a cook or a beautician or do cosmetology, I knew that those are great choices, but it would not work out for me. And what a lot of people would think would be easy for somebody would turn out to be more of a challenge than trying to do some of the college work. And I had to stick with my gut that this was the right move for me to make and what resources can be out there to be able to do it. And I was still scared while I was doing it. I kept thinking, oh, I don't think I can, or I was really concerned about a lot of that.
So now let's get to that.
Mhm.
Fast forward years later, you graduated college, you run michellesmissions.net. The inspiration behind that is implied, but I want to hear from your mouth. What is michellemission.net? What is the inspiration behind what you do and your commitment to advocating for other individuals with learning disabilities?
My mission behind michellesmission.net is to encourage, empower, and educate people on learning disabilities. I want to be able to help another person that has a disability to definitely go out there for their dreams. I want them to be able to do that. I want them to be able to have the resources and the support. And I also want them to know if they're wondering how that can happen, I want that there are resources, there's a lot of support out there that can make that dream happen. And it's just about looking for the resources and just everything that can make that happen. And it's just connecting with other people. Sometimes that happens whenever I write an article and somebody will say, wow, that's my story. I know what that's like. And that makes me feel like I'm not alone. And that always gives me some satisfaction. Or I can point somebody to some resources because I was very fortunate to have support services growing up, but I didn't know another person that had a disability. So I think that it's really important to have representation with that. And I even get to do that in the classroom and I work with students too. I have that chance to be that voice that tells them, you're not dumb. You have a learning disability. You learn differently. And I get to show them how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, and so towards the end of this podcast, we're going to actually take people online to visit your website, and so you can walk us through all the awesome resources that you have. And now I want to kind of circle back to your experiences earlier as a child and how you use that today. So one of the questions that I have for you, Michelle, is how important was that early identification and testing for you as a child, and how do you use that to educate parents today about the need? Because sometimes, like you said, there can be assumptions made about children, right? But it might
Right.
be a case of they need to be tested and be given the right support and resources.
I think it was very, I was very fortunate to be tested and identified early. Having a learning disability became a lifestyle for me. There were just certain things that I have to do if I'm going to go back to school. I need those services of extra time on tests, and I also need to have just some, wise choices with that. And specialty instruction was really key, because what ended up happening, I got the support, and I might have had my peers telling me that I wasn't very smart, but I had my parents that assured me that I had a learning disability and were working with the school on how to help me be successful, and they would advocate for me. But I also had my teachers showing me different ways that I could learn and different things that I could do. And that's something I always try to do with a lot of my students. I don't try to just give them something that they're going to take to get them through the school year or the next year. A lot of this stuff is things that they're going to have to do for the rest of their life.
Hey, I absolutely love what you just said about giving students something that they can take in with them into not just use it now, because what we as educators, whoever it is we're supporting, right? We're equipping kids with life skills. How are you doing it? Like, what are some examples of when you are supporting and working with young people? How are you equipping them with the skills that not only to survive today, but to be able to take those skills with them? What are some examples of what are you doing in the classroom to support those students?
A lot of times it's just showing them how to advocate and modeling that. I can remember last year I had a student who was really afraid to ask for help. She was struggling, and we have a great support team that'll come in when we have a plan period or a study hall and really be able to help out with the work. And she was really afraid to ask for help. And I said, well, here's how you can do this. And I showed her how to do that. And I said, well, I'll go with you if you're afraid. And that girl did that, and the teacher came and helped her, and she wasn't afraid to ask for help anymore. I will also sometimes, I can remember this year I had a student that was really frustrated in a class with math. All the kids know, do not ask me for help with math, but I can't do that. And I can just remember I looked at, I was wondering, why am I having to try to do this? I obviously can't do the assignment or be able to help them. And somebody said, well, that student's crying. And I turned over, and he was. And I went over to him and I said, okay, I'm not able to help you with the math, but I know how difficult it is. But I want you to let me know when you're struggling so we can get you the help that you need. And it took a little while, but eventually he stopped crying, and he raises his hand whenever he has a question now, and isn't afraid to ask. Sometimes it's showing them how to organize their backpacks. We might have papers going everywhere. And I can remember one year I worked with a student on organizing her backpack. And by the end of the school year, she was asking me how to spell extra, because she wanted one for her extra papers. And sometimes it might even be just something as little as to visual track. Maybe I'll take a piece of paper when they're reading so we can keep on track of what they're doing. And all of a sudden, they're able to see the information and be able to keep their eyes going where it's supposed to. And I just really emphasize a lot of just learning how to speak up and just saying what you need.
Hey, I really like the work that you're doing with children, and so I just want to give this little tidbit to parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
As educators, there are resources available
Right.
to be able to support your child. And just as Michelle is teaching children to advocate for themselves and speaking to parents, there is a whole world of internet out there. And I always keep
Yes.
saying, hey, you guys are doing TikToks and YouTube. Take some time to Google, or you can even use the search option on TikTok and YouTube to, if you feel like your child is struggling, right, to learn more about the services and opportunities available, and also speak to teachers, speak to your school administrators. Parents have to learn to advocate for your child. Now, most states are going to require this. It's pretty much a standard. When a child is struggling, they've been tested. As a teacher, I'm going to create an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. It's a written document that develops each child's personal learning plan. And listen, Michelle, I have a doctorate degree, but math was never my strong suit. The reason why I was able to achieve this doctorate degree because I just stopped at algebra 1 and I barely made it through that. You know what I mean? I literally remember going to pick up what degree that I was going to get, and I was in the military and they offer certain degrees on base, right? So I had to choose what was on base because online learning was not. And I was like, which one of these have the least amount of math? Literally. And it was between social psychology and human resources. And I was like, well, I'm already doing, this job in the military, so I can just do human resources, because I think it had an accounting class, which I was like, oh my God, I was at least it did not have the, algebra 1. There was no truth. So I only took human resources versus psychology because I was already kind of doing the resources work, right? Otherwise, I was social psychology. So I chose wisely. But parents learning to advocate, I love the fact that you're teaching young people to advocate for themselves. The other piece that I want to address with you before we move into a discussion about the resources and current advocacy that you're doing, Michelle, is you talked a lot about the impact of bullying. And so I want you to kind of touch on that and talk about like what can parents do and educators do to educate other children, right? And teach them not to bully because of the implications that this could have on a child. I mean, on a child, bullying children because they're different from you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the first things that parents can do is just really emphasize that everybody is different and not to make fun of other people, and to be very careful not to do that themselves, because children learn a lot by examples. I can also remember when I was growing up, we had neighbors that had I think it was a grandchild with an intellectual disability. And my dad said, I don't want you making fun of him. And we hung out and he was just like anybody else. And I think it's having that exposure to that helps, because then you treat them like they're just your family or your friend, and you don't want to make fun of somebody. And I think it's showing that, and also how a lot of parents react too, because I can go tell my students not to say the R word, but if they're hearing that at home, it's really hard in the classroom to say why that's not appropriate. So I think it's the talking. I think it's the education. I also know that one of the things will be involved with in the future in PA is doing trainings where we have curriculum that teaches students about disability education. And I think it's really just educating students about the people with disabilities are in our schools, they're in our community, and just how to get along and to show kindness. And also that we never know that we might end up being in that situation or another one in the future.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. I think just the most important thing is just being a kind-hearted and good person, right? And walking in love with everybody. I'm moving into this work. I've been teaching it for years. This DEI concept, right? But I always say, I was always hesitant to jump in at full force because I always say, gosh, it's a concept that I teach and I write curriculum around it. But my simple answer has always been, if we just walk in love and treat everybody with dignity and respect.
Exactly.
I'm just to realize that even me just saying it is not going to be the solution. I really have to go out and be part of like how you're doing that work in the advocacy of that. And I commend you for what you're doing, Michelle. So here you are, fast forward, you're an adult now. So tell me about your college experience, and you went on to continue building. You say you went in and got the support services that you needed, but tell me about your college experiences and how you got to where you are today.
Well, whenever I first started out at community college, I did face some stigma. Again, once I got there, I had people that thought using support services were cheating, so I didn't use them and my grades dropped. And I had a professor that told me that using that I was not going to I was going to have very limited job choices. But I did have some really great people. I had a person that did encourage me to use the support services. I was able to graduate. I got my associate's degree in early childhood education. I was able to move out on my own. I had some temp jobs, and being independent was really important to me and my family because they wanted me to have that independence, especially because I'm not able to drive. So I was really enjoying being able to go places and just being on my own. And I liked the jobs that I were at, but I always wanted more for myself. And for financial reasons, I had to move back in with my parents after a few years of living independently. And during that time, I thought, I want to go and give a university a try. And I found the program that had the least amount of math and science possible. Yes, it did. And I was interested in it. It had disability accommodations. And I was my advocate at that point. I even had an advisor was when we were trying to schedule classes. After I told him I'm not great at math, he said, "What about a chemistry class?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And it turned out I didn't even need the class. And what I ended up doing was a philosophy-based math course, and that really helped me. I got a D, I passed it, and that was the end of the math that I needed for the class. And my grades, other than that class, they improved. I was able to make dean's list for a semester, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it. After after I graduated, it took a long time to find the right job for me. I worked in some places that said, "Hey, we're disability friendly," but it turned out that they were anything but that for learning disabilities. And eventually I found a job working with the school district as a paraprofessional. I did that before I went to university, and I've been with them for 13 years. And I love being able to go in the classroom and make a difference. And I also started writing about having a disability. Writing has always been healing for me. I can remember my dad found a story I wrote when I was in third grade about a dinosaur and thought, "Oh, this is really good." And that just encouraged me to write more. And it took me to a different world whenever I was being bullied. And it helped me to find my voice because sometimes there may not be something I felt safe telling somebody else, but I could use that in my work. I could use it in my stories. And it gave me that voice that it was okay to speak out about having a disability. In my writing group, I had friends who told me, "You should really write about having a disability." And I didn't take their advice initially. I wrote stories and some really bad poetry that I would not read today. And when I got married and my husband and I bought our house, I could not unlock a door. When they found out I had limited hand dexterity on one of my evaluations a couple years prior to that. And the light bulb went off after I figured out, oh, that's why I can't do a lot of things with my hands. And the Mighty was a resource where people with disabilities often post stories about the experiences that they have with their conditions. And one of the prompts that they had was write about a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's hard for you with your disability. And that just gave me that inspiration to write about it. And that was my first article that got published. And when that was published, that was really healing for me. And that just encouraged me to write more articles and to be able to start my own blog where I get to write about my disability. And I also get to put pictures of my photography for sale on my store because I'm not able to drive. I notice details that other people will miss. And I get a chance when I'm on my walks. If I don't have a ride, I get to take pictures of flowers and I put them on for sale on my store.
So I said something earlier, but I did not finish my point, right?
Sorry.
I wanted to say there is nothing wrong with, since I work in a community college, if you're listening to this, when this airs, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to a community college.
No.
Michelle was told that she would never go beyond the community college, and here she is with a bachelor's degree. She's a teacher. She is a photographer and a writer and an advocate, right? And so, don't ever be limited by what other people think of you. Michelle is an example of an overcomer, and we're going to share her website. So let's go to your website so you can walk us through the awesome stuff that you are, out here doing and putting into the universe. So, okay, so the name of the website is michellemission.net. So even though we have a visual on the screen, if you're listening on YouTube, we'll walk you through this process that if you're listening on Spotify and other areas, and we'll also have the link to the website in our description. So here's michellesmission.net. So Michelle, I'll go wherever you want me to go.
If you go over to, I have About Me, and that just kind of shows a little bit about, kind of gives you like an idea of my journey, and just has a couple of the pictures with that. And then if you look on my blog, that's where I do a lot of the writing, where I talk about life with a learning disability, and I try to use a lot of nature analogies and just things that happen with my life with having one. And it's just amazing. People often think when you have a learning disability that it's done once you graduate, and the universe is always giving me new material and things to just be able to talk about. If you look over on my photography, these are some of the pictures that I have that I've taken. Flowers, obviously, are a really big part of my life. I love to take pictures of flowers and butterflies and just a lot of other nature things. My husband and I also love to go to botanical gardens as well. And and those are some of the lilacs that we grew a couple years ago, and found a moth on the street one day whenever I was doing some errands. So that was one of those nice unexpected surprises. I do have different categories. They have like journals and notebooks. If you click on that, that shows like some of the ones that I have for sale. And I also have some mugs, and the prints I have on there as well, that from some of the places that we visited. And there's also some media of some different places that I've been published on. Well, that's actually my disability forum, where people can talk about different topics about having a disability. I try to, and there's also the podcast that I've been on. I have them listed underneath there if you want to learn more. And it just shows some of the different podcasts that I've been on, and I try to update that regularly. And if you go under press, that will show you the Mighty. I've also had pictures of word gathering. And if you go on to read more, then it'll take you over to my portal at the Mighty, and some of the stuff that I've gotten published. The same with word gathering. And if you look at at the bottom, I have an anthology that I was published in last summer called Rediscovering Your Story. And I went to a workshop where we wrote about different topics, and I had 3 of my stories that were published in that. And you can purchase. Yeah. Thank you.
Michelle, I really love what you have done. You are an example of the type of person that I want to highlight on this podcast, right? Because what you've done is not succumb to what people thought, or I think people have a tendency to project on others, right? And you didn't succumb to that, right? And here at WORxK Solutions and on this podcast, we are so focused on mindset and advocacy. Like as a coach, I don't just say, okay, here's your resume, right? Or like as a career coach, I always talk to clients about their mindset, because that's what's going to help you to get to success. And so you're an excellent example of mindset. So we talked a little bit before we came on this podcast today, and we want to make sure that we're partnering with you. And July is Disability Pride Month. So, guys,
Yes.
in July, we are going to link some of Michelle's stories from her blog and her information to our blog. We're going to just do a little bit of cross collaboration. We're going to make sure that we run some additional video clips, even though this is going to be airing in April. We're going to run some video clips of Michelle from this episode of the podcast. We'll break it down even more. And we just want to make sure that we are highlighting your story. And Michelle, at that point in time, if you have any events going on that you're appearing at, you can feel free to email them to us and we will include them in our email blast as well. This has been such a great episode. I can go on and on and on. But I want you to wrap us up today by one, sharing some tidbits of wisdom with us. And then, in terms of your journey, and then how can people contact you? And if you can feel free to shamelessly plug any events that you have coming up and share with us.
Sure. I would just love to tell people that success doesn't always come in the package that you expect. Sometimes it comes in something even better. And you can find me at my blog, michellesmission.net. I'm doing a whole thing with spring, with everything that comes up, with just because it's definitely my favorite season, as you probably can tell, with all the flowers. And we're talking about just like blooming and just even like spring cleaning and just some of the stuff that kind of can be difficult when you have a disability, and just some of the ideas that I had to get rid of. So we're going to have some really nice content coming up.
So, Michelle, we are so excited to have you on today. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us and inspire our listeners with your story. This podcast has been full of tidbits and wisdom, everything from, teaching us to advocate for ourselves and speak up more, to just sharing your story of being an overcomer. Guys, if you are tuning in, be sure to check out all of Michelle's great things that she has coming up, talking about spring. And we look forward to collaborating with you in July. Thanks for coming on today. And thank you for tuning in to the WORxK Solutions Career Coach RX podcast. And you can find us across all social media at WORxK Solutions LLC and Career Coach RX. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.